Lucia Castle, voice teacher here. Very nice to see you for our weekly video on bridging the gap from anatomy and biomechanics to traditional voice practices. Today a topic, it's the second of the digestive system, and today it will be on the throat. The throat meaning the pharynx, as you find in the title. The pharynx for us, the singers, is a topic of great work and central to voice production and to tone production. So just get to the anatomy as usual. And I will take something, as usual, my app, Essential Anatomy 5. As I said last time, it is said to be a collapsible tube. What it means? It means that if you see, as usual in the tables, anatomical tables, it has not a structure to maintain his form. Yes, we have to swallow, so it has first to close on the passage and especially to bring the food down into the esophagus. For that, it has to have this capacity of collapsibility. For us, the singers, this can be a problem or an advantage, depending on how we manage it, and not only how it is managed in usual life. So, I will point some studies on obstructive sleep apnea, because it's important for two things. First, because it has been widely studied, so it gives us information about the practices we usually used for throat management, and they are to bridge what they have discovered, and second, have some clear ideas of how things work inside, and especially how they are related. So that, for example, you will see in the studies that in patients with obstructive sleep apnea, there is an activation of the genioglossum, that is this muscle of the tongue, higher than in healthy subjects. Also, you will find that the activation of the other muscles opening the throat, meaning the muscles that open the constriction of those muscles, otherwise they are constrictors, as we will see later, is less present in the... this is controversial because I put two studies. One say that it's the same amount in healthy subjects and in subjects with obstructive sleep apnea, and the other says that no, they have a higher activation, co-activation as it's called, of the non-pharyngeal muscles, the peripharyngeal muscles, the young subjects and the healthy subjects, meaning that an impairment in this co-activation could have some sort of role into the collapsing of the tube while sleeping. Why it is important for us? First, if you suffer from obstructive sleep apnea, you're going to, of course, having a problem during your daily life, and this impacts voice, as everything that impacts the body so heavily, but at the same time you're going to activate a lot this genioglossum muscle, and you are going to have an impaired function somewhere of some other muscles, and this, yes, it's a problem during the night, of course, and you have to see a doctor as usual or seek treatment. Now there are very, very good new things as the tape on the mouth to sleep with the nose. Always ask your doctor, I'm just saying for information. And also you find a study in which is observed that the collapse doesn't happen while nasal breathing, because nasal breathing changes the characteristics of the speed of the flow entering. Yeah, nice. And when you see that us coming from classical technique, we usually teach everybody to breathe by the nose, even if in concert or in rehearsals or for their songs, they are going to use the mouth breathing. And this also because it will shape those pharyngeal muscles and the breathing muscles in a different way, and all the posturing inside will be different. And it can be an advantage to have a correct breathing pattern by the nose, and then to train for your style that can involve the mouth breathing or the nose breathing with the mouth open. This study says what? It says that with the mouth closed, the nasal breathing can have a speed, but it doesn't become, with the nasal breath, you find that the speed can augment, but the flow will remain more laminar, as we say in physics, meaning with less disturbation into the flow. And those disturbances are related to the collapsing of the pharynx. So for classical singing, in which we want the throat completely open, the fact of breathing mostly all the time that you can by the nose, it's really interesting, and it's really something of value, as we know, us trained by bel canto teachers, that absolutely it has a huge value in having yet the posturing of the throat and partially also of the larynx ready, because they are connected also. So we come back. I take this photo that you're going to see. Since the pharynx, little reminder of the last time, it has an upper part, medium part and lower part. In here we are going to see the muscles of the pharynx. Also a reminder that the muscles of the pharynx are striated muscles, and someone now calls them skeletal muscles. What is interesting is that they have, from a control point of view, they are not controllable at will directly at the usual skeletal muscles that you use for your workouts, for example. So meaning that in the other article, but go to the first part that I've done last week, it is said that they act as visceral muscles. When we are going to see the vagus system and what we use as nervous system for singing, you will see that the vagus system is very important and it has an emotional value, meaning that we can regulate by emotional status and anxiety, not anxiety, how can I say, attitudes, its reactivity. And this for us is really important, because mostly voice is related to vagus system. And here we are going to see the muscles, as the pharynx has nasopharynx, oropharynx, that is behind the oral cavity, behind the mouth, and laryngopharynx, that is the last part before the esophagus. At the same time, we have in parallel the muscles, the constrictor of the pharynx. We have the superior, the middle and the inferior. What it is interesting is that they have as nerve to control them both from the pharyngeal plexus of the vagus and the glossopharyngeal nerve. So we are going to, in the future, see what it means from the command point of view. I can just say that when you have fear, you are in fight or flight response, you will tend to constrict the pharynx, sorry. Yeah, the larynx, no, but the pharynx, yes, because it is connected to the vagus nerve. So, when we go to see other muscles that are related to the opening of the throat that we see in those kind of studies about the obstruction of the superior airways during sleeping, you will see that it's very important. The activity in this study, in this article, is very interesting. The position of the hyoid bone. And the position of the hyoid bone, as you see in this other photo, is influenced by muscles that have another origin from the nervous system. What it means that from a training point of view, to have a direct order into the activity of the muscles can be a great advantage to train those functions and so to manage a little the excess of the, how can I say, of the negative response of the arousal system or the fear system. We don't use very often, and this I say in advance, to use those muscles for singing. This is a stylistic thing. But in my practice, in my experience, and in all those videos I'm making for you, the logic is that we can take an advantage in training into the structure what gives better the control, the functions and the strengths that we can use for singing. So when we have some function well developed, we are going to use them in a smaller way, but they are going not to give, how can I say, give compensations or give fatigue compensations. That can be a great problem and also cannot develop well a voice. So why I'm talking about the pharynx? Because what we've learned till now, it has constrictus muscles. It is a structure collapsible. It is a structure that will collapse if the flow of air is too fast, or has a tendency to collapse if the flow of air is too fast, and there is not an activation of some peripharyngeal muscles that serve the purpose of opening it. We have learned also that if you have obstructive apnea, first it's very bad for you, and look for a solution, and there are some pretty nice now, that is the nose breathing during the night with some devices, and ask always your doctor on those topics, because it, as I said previously, it's just information. And at the same time, if you have all the time an activation of the genioglossus, you are going to have a disbalance into your tongue management. Also, if you activate mostly the genioglossus and not the other peripharyngeal muscles, you're going to have a pharynx that has a tendency to collapse, even if you don't suffer from obstructive apnea, so that you're going to impair your singing, because the genioglossus and the tongue are very important for articulation, tone production, as you see in this article, for the positioning of the trachea and the opening of the trachea, and as some studies suggest, and as we know stylistically, for voice production, tone production. And there is a research come out quite recent, I've seen on the page of Eleonora Bruni. She's a voice teacher and researcher that I've seen in at PVOC in Tallinn in August. And they made a research and they presented it with the Dr. Franco Fussi, that is another very good, very good researcher of a very high level, on the hyoid bone and voice production. So for the hyoid bone, to train the muscles related could help in helping the opening of the throat. And now we get to the stylistic thing. How we manage the throat in singing. Well, if we read here, it is interesting that there is something said, that it is that those muscles, the pharyngeal constrictor, have a similar effect on all the three muscles. Okay. And it's thought to close the airway as part of swallowing. Yes, so they protect the airway from the passage of the food and to get an accidental passage of food or liquid of anything else into the lungs. That could be a fatal thing. At high lung volumes, they act as constrictors. So, with a lot of air inside, they are constrictors. Whereas at low lung volumes, they act as dilators. When we want a constricted pharynx, for singing, it is a topic that has been central in the last decades, because before we didn't want a constricted pharynx. It was not in the style. It was not in the management of the voice. It was not into the aesthetic of the voice. The constricted pharynx has some problems because it's going to interfere with the tone, with the extension, with the capacity of the dynamics, and also the intensity, the capacity into working in the intensity and nuances of the voice. Of course, if it is too much constricted, closing the passage, it will render impossible phonation. So, in some sorts, we always want some opening of the throat. How we can do the opening of the throat? By training, for example, the muscles to be more dilators than constrictors. And here you find in the video the practice of Michael Trimble, the practice is said of Corelli, the great singer Corelli, the fact that we used images as be surprised, and this opens the throat, even if I do it without the mouth. It is open inside. Yeah, they teach me that, of course. With something that is without really working on the pharynx muscles directly as this, because you are going to change the shape. And if you are going to change the shape, you are going to change the tone of those muscles. And when we change the tone of those muscles, we are changing not the function that they're doing as a stylistic thing, but we are changing the color of your voice. And we have to think that it's a continuum from enough throat to sing, but quite constricted, to throat completely open. It is a stylistic thing. You have in the pharynx constricted and the throat constricted, or tensed if you want, but they are two things quite different. The country style, some popular music style that I studied in Italy, and some other styles in which you have this quality of throat really closed. How much closed? As I said, you can't have completely closed. So, but for those styles, if you want to gain, then a little opening, more opening, more opening, more opening, till getting to the bel canto, that is the completely open throat, and you're going to manage the tone and the voice very little by the mouth part, meaning the tongue and the hyoid bone. It's very limited, and a lot by the breath management. And the voice will develop by itself. Also some they made, since there is still a work of the larynx muscles, they made some exercises to maintain those larynx muscles or those other muscles strong enough, but you don't use them so strongly while you're singing. You will see that the throat was not that open. It was another kind of sound when we went into the 20th century. The 20th century put the spoken voice, the intimate voice, the not most beautiful voice into the center. It is something that art has done into the 20th century, and the voice has been into this research also, so that the individual could appear, the individual choices, the individual artist, the individual signature can become something of very important, because we are not only aesthetically, how can I say, forced into a paradigm in which it is only the most beautiful voice. This is something that in music in the past has been present also. There are some kind of music of the polyphony into 14th century that they were not just beautiful, but the voice as we intended and vocal technique developed a beautiful voice in the sense of the breath management of bel canto and the throat opened by bel canto. So we have country music, country singers if we want, and now stylistically we have also others, of course, because it has spread in other styles, it has been accepted in other styles, quite pretty cool as thing. And then we have bel canto. Then we have a little closer satiric management, that is also a way of intending bel canto. Very interesting, because it has managed to give the throat management and the larynx management and the aid of the larynx and the kind of throat closure for and tension for other styles that are not classicals. And then we go to the still and other kind of technique that have developed other throat managements. So if you are not directly opening the throat, what are we doing? In classical we teach to breathe by the nose and not too much air. And as you've seen, what is this paradigm? Is that in that way the muscles of the pharynx are going to act as dilators and not constrictors. But when you want a little more groove, when you want a little more acid into the voice, a little more drive, a little more thrill, you can do what? You can put higher volumes. When you put higher volumes, you're going to have, they act as constrictors, so you must manage very well. And this is the belting, the traditional American belting of Broadway. Now the belting is done with a different action into the vocal folds, is closer to a more technical way of using the internal muscles of the larynx and the muscles of the body, in my view, in general. Classically it was done with more air, especially in the upper part, because it was going to constrict and give it this kind of drive. Why you must be very careful, because if you put too much, they are constrict too much, they are going to break your sound. Oh, sorry, I was forgetting. Into the management with tensed pharynx, we use what as dilators? The peripharyngeal muscles, meaning the muscles you see in the neck. Here, some muscles connected with the hyoid bone, and the position of the hyoid bone that will have an effect in opening the throat, so that you are not training directly the muscles of the pharynx of becoming more in the shape and in the tone of constant dilators, but you can have them in different kind of constrictor attitude, also usual constrictor attitude, by managing the hyoid. We have some limits there. The limits are that you cannot completely, in my experience and in what is my understanding of vocal technique, use the hyoid bone at the place of opening the throat. You have to balance the things, meaning that if you have, for example, for some reasons, the genioglossum too much activated, there's going to be all the time too much activated, is going to create a problem into this hyoid management. So you're going to have to open more the throat, by the throat itself or by the breathing strategy. You see where I'm going? Do you see where we start putting together the ingredients? So for you, and this I will say when I will analyze some videos of Michael Trimble, what Michael Trimble proposed to have a neutral larynx, this thing for you, is it what? Is it throat management? Is it tongue management? Is it hyoid bone management, on what? I will get specific when I will analyze. What I wanted to say is that if you want to see some hyoid bone management in fantastic voices, look at those photos. Sarah Vaughan used it a lot, and George Michael used it a lot. George Michael, and I will make a video on that, had a management of his voice for which at a certain point he changed. If you see from Wham, from the first starting point, and then the last concert, I will make an analysis, him and Freddie Mercury, you will see that he changes something. He changed how he abducted his vocal cords, getting with a greater, what we call sustain into, meaning also the capacity of having a medium voice with a color that it didn't have before, and some high notes that it didn't have before, and high management that it didn't have before in those terms. And while doing that, it didn't, or doing that is the opposite of this hyoid bone management, meaning that you have all the time to, as I said before, make a dialogue and balance between the functions, because if you push too much, every time you manage with something, you're losing something else. So in bel canto, you lose the drive into the tongue. That can be very interesting in Broadway, can be very interesting in pop, can be very interesting in rock, for example, or in punk. But if in punk, in rock, in pop, you want more extension, you cannot not manage and know to dialogue with those functions and decide how to use differently the ingredients. And for today is all. Another recap.